Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Ignite. My name is Brandon, for those of you who don't know me, and obviously I'm not with you today because I am in Walt Disney World. We brought our daughter Emma on her first trip to Disney, and so we're ready for a fun-filled week of Mickey and Minnie and Frozen and Frozen and so much Frozen. I'm going to be so sick of Frozen, so please be praying for me this week. But it's going to be a great week, and I'm sad that I can't be with you, but I thought, you know what? Let's continue this Netflix and Chill series and talk about dating and relationships and give you the top 5 things, the top 5 lessons for an amazing relationship right here from Disney, because there's some cool things we can learn. And I'm actually just going to jump in and give you your first one. And so if you're filling out notes, just go ahead and take those out right now, because this is lesson number 1, and it's this: love with 100 love. Love with 100 love. And let me show you what I mean. So let's take a little trip inside a shop here. So inside these shops, there's all sorts of stuff you can buy. And I just wanted to show you a few things, like how much they cost. Like right here, a lollipop. A single lollipop's like $3. A huge lollipop's almost $7. Let's look at some other stuff. If you go right over here, you'll see like a simple Coke machine. What's a Coke? Like $1, $1.50? Well, not at Disney World. Coke is over $3. Over there, you'll see cotton candy for over $4. I mean, it's just puffed sugar, right? And yet it's so expensive. And the question is, why is it that we are willing to pay so much money for these things? Like, why is it that we are willing to pay outrageous prices for something we know isn't worth it? And the reason is, I think, because when you come to Disney World, Disney makes you feel like the most important person in the world. No matter who you are, you feel so special. Like today, Emma got this little button that says first time. And so everywhere we go, people greet her and like say congratulations on your first time. I even see these little girls dressed up as princesses, and you'll watch as the characters around here will bow before them as if they're real princesses. There's stories about how at Disney they'll make you the grand marshal of the parade, or how people like Snow White will give up lunch breaks and dinner breaks just to sit and talk with kids. It's an amazing place, right? It's the reason that we're willing to pay over $100. Well, not me, we're cheap, but other people are willing to pay over $100 just to come for one day. Because they make you feel so special. They invest so much in you, and so you're willing to invest in them. Well, the same thing is important when it comes to our relationships. We've got to love with 100 love. And let me tell you what that means, right? So there's this moment where Jesus is sitting with his disciples, and James is going to have these words up on the screen right now. He's sitting with his disciples, and he's telling them about love. And look at what he says right here. He says, "My command is this: love each other as I've loved you. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends." In other words, what Jesus is saying is that if you really want to love someone, you have to love them unconditionally. You have to love them sacrificially. You've got to give everything for someone. You've got to love them with 100 love. I mean, think about it. If we're willing to sacrifice and be so loyal to Disney just because they make us feel special, how amazing is your relationship going to be if you're giving 100%, if you're sacrificing for that other person and loving them with that unconditional kind of love, where you think about them more than you think about yourself? See, I had somebody come up to me one time and they said, you know what, I think a great relationship is 50-50. You know, it's not 60-40, it's not 80-20. Both people are giving evenly. And I kind of agree with that to a point. But I think a great relationship, an amazing relationship, needs to be not just 50-50, but 100. Both people need to give 100%. They need to love the other person 100%, which means they need to love the other person more than they love themselves. And if you're in a relationship like that, where you both are loving the other person more than you love yourself, putting them first, sacrificing for them, that's an amazing relationship. Like, there's no relationship better than that. And so that's lesson number 1, love with 100 love. Now, for right now, Tim and Rebecca, they're going to lead you in a song, and then in just a few minutes, I'm going to come back to another part of the park, and I'm going to show you another cool thing here at Disney World. So I'll see you in a minute. All right, everyone, so I'm actually standing in front of the most popular ride here at Disney World. This is Walt Disney's Carousel of Progress. I'm just kidding, nobody rides that ride, except for me. Actually, here is the most popular ride in all of Disney. That is Space Mountain, and actually right now, I looked it up, there's a 160-minute wait for that ride. That means you have to wait almost 3 hours to get on that ride, and it is hot as Florida out here. So you gotta really love that ride. right? So this is the most popular ride in Disney, and it's a roller coaster. And have you ever had one of those experiences on a roller coaster where you go with a bunch of friends to go sit on this ride, to get on this ride? But as you get in line, you realize that you all aren't in the same place, right? Like a line or a car only lets two of you in, and so you have to get in different rows just to be able to get on the ride. And a little bit later, you begin to realize that you're not actually all in line with each other. Like some people are gonna get on earlier, some people are gonna get on later, and so you have to do that awkward thing where you like ask the people behind you if they wanna cut in front of you, or if you're like me, you ask the people in front of you if you can cut in front of them. I'm just kidding, I don't do that. But the truth is that you're not in line with each other. And so if you're gonna go on this journey, you realize you have to all get in the same line, you have to be in the same place. Well, that same sort of thing is true in our relationships. Like I had a college roommate one time where we were just so different from each other, right? Like he would set his alarm for 8 a.m., but he wouldn't get up until 10 a.m., but he would snooze it every 10 minutes in between there. Or I had another instance where he would start a shower, but he wouldn't get in for an hour later. Or there was another time where he would like get in the shower, but he would flush the toilet like 10 times while he was in the shower. I still don't even want to know what he was doing. Funny thing is, you might even know him though. His name's Tim, he does worship here. I'm just kidding, Tim doesn't shower. But the funny thing is that we just didn't line up. Like those may have been important things for him and they were important things for me, but we just weren't in the same place. And in a relationship, you've got to be on the same spiritual page. You've got to be on the same page on a lot of things. Like think about a relationship. If you guys aren't on the same page where it comes to your life goals, like one of you wants to go travel the world and the other you wants to stay in their hometown, that's gonna be challenging for your relationship. Or if one of you wants to have kids and the other doesn't, like what are you gonna do about that? Like I've looked into it, you can't just rent them, like they're yours to keep. Right? Or if you're on a different page about how you discipline your kids, all of these things can create challenges in your relationship. And so you've got to be on the same page. Well, when it comes to spiritual relationships, with each other, I mean, that's even more important. Look at how scripture talks about it. And James will put these words up here on the screen. This is a pastor named Paul, and he's talking to his church, and he's saying this: don't become partners with those who reject God. Because how can you make a partnership out of right and wrong? That's not a partnership, that's war. Now what he's not saying here, he's not saying you can't love people who aren't Christian, he's not saying don't hang around people who aren't Christian, but what he's saying is that if something like having kids or where you live or how you have habits in the bathroom, if that kind of stuff can ruin a relationship, just imagine how not being on the same spiritual page can impact your relationship. I mean, if you really want to grow in your relationship with God, you've got to be on the same spiritual page, you've got to be lined up here. And so maybe think about your relationship. And we talked about this before, but think, or where are there some places in your relationship that you can really begin to focus on getting on the same spiritual page? Maybe that means praying with each other regularly. Maybe that means coming to church each week together. Or maybe you're not in a relationship and you need to think of what are some ways that you can begin to plan out how you're going to be on the same spiritual page. Like that top 10 list that we talked about a few weeks ago. What's going to be in that list that makes sure you're on the same spiritual page as the person that you end up falling in love with? Because if you want a great relationship, you've got to be on the same spiritual page. Now we're gonna actually do a really fun game right now while I travel to another location, and they're gonna lead you in this. Michaela's gonna lead you in this, and it's gonna tie into our next lesson. So I'm gonna let you play that, and I'll see you in a minute. Well, welcome back, everybody. How was that game? Was that a lot of fun? What I love about games like that is that they're just so simple, right? Like the only way that you can win at a game like that is by just hanging around the other person. You can't learn that kind of information in a day. You just learn it by being with each other, by having routines with each other and getting to know that other person. And that leads us into our third lesson today, and that's this. Routines aren't boring. Routines aren't boring, and let me show you a routine I've actually got here at Disney World. We're going to show you a couple pictures up on the screen. So this first picture is a picture of my first trip to Disney World, and it's me standing here in front of this window that I'm in front of right now. And then check this out. This is a picture of today, and this is Emma on her first trip to Disney World. Right? That's uncanny, isn't it? It's the exact same picture, like father, like daughter, right? But every time I come to Disney World, the thing I do is I come back to this window and I take a funny picture of me pouting in front of this. It's just one of the things I do at Disney World. And it's this fun routine that just allows us to have an even better experience like this. And maybe you have things like this in your life, routines you have at Christmas or Thanksgiving, these traditions in your life that you do them over and over again. And they just heighten that experience. They make it all that much more amazing. That's because routines are so important, right? Routines don't have to be boring. Routines can have powerful impacts on our life. And there's actually a routine Jesus taught us to have, and we did this last week. If you were with us, we did communion. And we sat down and we shared this meal that's been shared by Christians for thousands of years. And if you're not familiar with it, what communion is on the last night that Jesus was with his disciples, he sat down with them and he had a meal. And then look at what he said to them. James is going to have these words up on the screen. Jesus said this. It said, while they were eating, Jesus took bread, and when he'd given thanks, he broke it and gave it to his disciples, saying, take it, this is my body. And then he took a cup, and when he'd given thanks, he gave it to them, and they all drank it. And he said, this is my blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for you and for many for the forgiveness of sins. Do this as often as you drink it, is how he ends that. And what he means by that is as often as you can, as often as you share in these elements, remember me, right? Remember my love for you. But it's more than just remembering Jesus. It's remembering his sacrifice. It's sharing in that meal again. It's realizing that Jesus is still with us. He's not gone. It's an opportunity for us to sit down at the table and share a meal that people have shared for thousands of years and be connected to them, be connected to each other, remember that we're all a part of God's family, and experience God's grace in this really unique and powerful way. And with that last line, it almost gives us the sense that Jesus is saying that we need to do this as often as possible, because the more we do it, the more we are connected to him. It's this routine that we do it again and again that allows us to draw even closer to Jesus. And I think that same thing is true in our relationships. You know, some people think routines are boring, but I think routines are essential to my marriage. Like for Leanne and myself, we have routines every week, every month. Every week we go out and have a date together. We don't always do the same thing, but we always have a date. And even if we go to the same place, it's always unique. Or every quarter we go on a little getaway together, right? We make sure that we get away and we do something fun and special, and it allows us to grow in our relationship. And so think to yourself, what could some routines be that you have in your relationship, or maybe a relationship that you're hoping to have in the future? What kind of routines do you want? Maybe that means like you kiss each other every time you walk in the door. That's a routine. Or every anniversary or birthday, you write a love letter to the other person. Or you go on a date every week. Or you have dinner 4 to 5 times a week. Like, what are your routines? And you know what I'd really like for you guys to do right now? We're going to take a quick pause while I travel somewhere else in the park. But I'd like you to actually take a moment and really do this. Come up with a list of maybe just 5 routines that you could have in your relationship. And think about how those could improve that relationship and get even better. And then I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to a minute to do that, to take this thing that, you know, this practical idea and write it down and try to have something you can walk away with. And then I'm going to come back and we're going to jump into our final 2 points, okay? So you take about 30 seconds to a minute to do that, and I'll see you in just a short bit. Okay, I'll see you in a sec. All right, well, welcome back, everybody. So right now we are in Epcot. We just got here, but earlier this morning we were in Disney's Animal Kingdom, and we got to ride one of probably our favorite rides since we've been here. We got to ride the Kilimanjaro Safari, and I just want to let you see real quick Emma's favorite point on that ride, her highlight of that ride. So take a quick look at her favorite part.
I just saw the booties.
What booties?
I see the zebra booties.
The zebra booties? What did it look like?
We're having a pretty good look.
Aw, your joy.
Oh, another scary bird over here to the right. A couple yellow bills.
Just in case you didn't hear what Emma said, she saw zebra booties. So you got to come all the way to Disneyland to see that. I mean, that's exactly what I expected to see when I got here. But, you know, the funny thing about that ride, the Kilimanjaro Safari, is that there's so many safety precautions on that ride. Like, you think you're driving through this real live animal experience, but there's safety measures everywhere, like the lions that we saw. There's this huge pit around them, so even though you feel close, there's no way they can get to you. Or the elephants, there's a huge moat around them, so there's no way that the elephants are ever going to get near you. You're always going to be safe. Everything about that ride is set up to protect you and keep you safe. In fact, even with Emma, like, I sat her on my lap. We kept her on the inside of the vehicle just to make sure that nothing happened to her, because we wanted to protect her on that ride. I don't know why we thought that she might actually jump out of the car. I mean, she won't even come up and talk to most of you, so there's no way she's running into the animals. But but we wanted to keep her safe no matter what. And that's what we do when things matter to us. We put up boundaries around them. We protect them with everything we have. And that's actually our next point about relationships. You need to protect your relationship with everything you have. You need to protect it with everything you've got. Jesus one time talked about a farmer who went out and he planted a crop. And then that night, the farmer's enemy came up and he planted weeds in the middle of the farmer's crop. And so when everything began to sprout, the farmer realized that in the midst of his crop, there were all these weeds. But what he also realized is that he couldn't pull out the weeds, because if he pulled them out, it would kill his crop at the same time. And that same danger is possible in our relationships. Things can get into our relationships that can be like weeds. They can get in there and they can harm our relationship, and sometimes they can harm it to the point of no return where you can't fix it. And so one of the things we have to do is we have to put up boundaries. We have to put up barriers in our relationships to protect it. I mean, if you think about it, barriers and boundaries, they're not there just to hold us back for the sake of holding us back. Like that pit around the lion's den, that's not keeping me back just for the sake of keeping me back. That's keeping me back because if I got through there, nothing good is going to happen. It's protecting me. And so you have to have things like that in your relationship. So some of the things that Leanne and I have that are boundaries and barriers in our relationship, things that protect us, are if we get the sense that somebody doesn't have the best interest in our relationship at heart, we just try not to be around that person alone. We try to keep ourselves safe from that, or at least always be together. Or we always have each other's passwords, so we have complete access to each other's email and all of our accounts and stuff like that. We make a commitment not to lie to each other about things, even small lies, because that truth, that honesty is a good barrier, it's a good boundary to keep our relationship strong. And so as you think about your relationship or a future relationship that you want to have, what are some important barriers and boundaries that you can have? What are things that are going to protect you? What kind of things that can you put up in your relationship? Like maybe you make sure that you've got honesty in your relationship, or maybe you make sure to stay away from people who might try to break your relationship apart. What are some of those things? And so take a moment, think about that. What are some of those boundaries? And then in just a second, we're going to do some Disney magic and we're going to appear at our next spot, okay? And so I'm going to go right in here and then you're going to see what's going to happen, all right? Okay, so here's some Disney magic for you. We're actually back in the house right now and it's nighttime. Actually, we're in my daughter Emma's room. She just fell asleep. And I'll be honest with you, one of the most special things to do as a parent is to watch your kids sleep. Like, you almost forget how annoying they are. Like, whenever I see her sleeping, I think about how perfect and peaceful she looks. It almost makes me forget about how just a few hours ago she was throwing a fit in pretty much every inch of the Magic Kingdom. Happiest place on earth, my foot. Or it makes me forget about those moments that she just goes like, ah. I don't know, I think she thinks like we're dogs or something like that. But, nevertheless, I love her. And sometimes I'll find myself just sneaking into her room at night and while she's sleeping and just praying for her. Like just praying and thanking God for this little angel in my life. Thanking God that I have her, that just praying for her future and for her safety. Praying how much I love her. There's this passage by James. It's actually the brother of Jesus, and he talks about prayer. And look at what he says. He says, "Is anyone in trouble among you? Then let them pray. And is anyone happy? Then let them sing songs of praise." Basically, what James is saying is that we have to pray in the good times and in the bad times. We have to pray when everything's going right in our lives and then when everything's falling apart. Because it's easy to pray when things are falling apart, but it's really hard to keep praying when things are good, when everything's together. And one of the interesting things is that part of the reason I can pray for Emma in the good times, like tonight, is because I know what it's like to pray for her in the bad times. One of the things you realize, or at least some of us realize when you're married and you're trying to have kids, is that you don't get pregnant the first time you try, right? Like, unless you're 15 years old and in the back of a car, it's not that easy to get pregnant, at least for a lot of people. And we've known a lot of couples who've struggled. And one of the things that many people know about us is that when we tried to have Emma, it wasn't an easy thing for us. Like, it was really hard. I Like, I remember the first month realizing that we weren't going to get pregnant, and then the second month came, and the third month, and the 6th month, and the 12th month. And it ended up taking us over 18 months to be able to get pregnant. And let me tell you, these were some of the 18 worst months of my life. Because every month you're excited, every month you're hoping that something's going to be different, and every month you get let down. Every month you think you failed. Every month you wonder, is this ever going to happen? Every month you feel yourself on the brink of tears because the thing that you want most in the entire world, the thing that you're begging God for, just doesn't seem like it's going to happen. And in those times, when I look back and I wonder, how did we get through those horribly tough times, times that can take such a toll on a marriage? I mean, I've seen marriages end because people couldn't get pregnant. When I look back and I ask myself, what is it that held us together? How did we get through that? It may sound cliche, but honestly, it's the fact that we prayed. It's the fact that every single day and every single night we had this trust, we had this belief that God was still listening, that God still heard our prayers, that God still had something in store for us. We didn't know what it was, but we just trusted that God loved us and God knew the best for us. And as we watched so many marriages struggle through this situation of not being able to have kids, somehow we even watched our marriage get stronger. And it allows us to look at Emma in these great times and remember how we were even praying for her in the tough times, that her entire life before she was even born, she was shrouded and covered in prayer. And there's something just incredibly powerful about that prayer, how it can bond you closer to God, it can bond us closer to our kids, and it can bond you closer together as a couple and deepen and strengthen your relationship. And let me tell you, that's actually lesson 5. If there's any lesson more important than all the others, any that'll change your relationship in an instant, it's this one. Pray together. Pray together. And so I have a challenge for you. I want to challenge you in your relationship to pray with each other. Or if you're somebody who's not in a relationship, I want to challenge you to pray for your relationship. And what I want to challenge you to do is to pray for it every single day for the next week. Now, I know that some of you might be thinking to yourselves, I have a hard time praying by myself. You're telling me now I have to pray for someone else or with someone else? That's going to be incredibly awkward. And so I understand that, and so I'm going to make it easy on you. What I want to do is I want to give you a very easy prayer that you can pray every single day. Just a little bit of a kind of an outline of what a prayer could look like. And here's what it is. The first thing you pray for when you pray with the person you're praying for, with your spouse or with your boyfriend or your girlfriend, the first thing you want to do is you want to find something to thank God for about that person. Right? So maybe it's just how kind they are, maybe it's something they did for you that day, but give thanks for that person in some way. The second thing I want you to do, and this is a big game changer here, the second thing I want you to do is to ask forgiveness for something you did. Right? One of the powerful things about prayer is that you have to humble yourself in those moments. We tend to ask forgiveness for something the other person did, right? We want them to list all their wrongs. But when you pray for forgiveness, when you make that the thing that you do every single night, you look back over the day and you say, look, I could have been a better husband or a better wife or a better boyfriend or girlfriend in this way. I mean, that's something that will transform your relationship because you have to humble yourself before that person and humble yourself before God. And that's an incredible experience. And then the last thing I want you to do is part of that prayer is for you guys to both grow in your relationship with God, to grow in that relationship both individually and as a couple. And as you do this, as you pray this simple prayer, I just want you to be looking at how God is impacting and how God is changing your relationship. Because let me tell you, praying together, that is one of the key things that will give you an incredible, amazing relationship.